Welcome to the Gnostic Informant. I'm Jesus, the Logos incarnate, and you are about to attain true Gnosis.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true Gnosis. And I'm with Dr. Kip Davis in the house. What's up, Kip?
Hey, man. Not much. It's good to be here. Happy Easter.
Yeah, happy Easter, happy Passover, happy.
If we're saying that kind of thing.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat.
Happy holiday.
Happy holiday. Happy spring.
Although it's not very springy here, though. I gotta tell you.
No. It's okay.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's been cold and wet.
Really?
Like for the last few weeks. It's weird. My birthday's coming up, and usually, I mean, it's quite often my wife and my kids and I usually go out for dinner for my birthday, and very often I'll be sitting out on the patio in my shorts, in my t-shirt. But I don't think that's happening this week.
It's just one of those cold years.
It's just cold. So, but yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah.
So I was thinking we could talk a little bit about, around this time of the year, this is where all the videos come out on YouTube. It's like, is Easter pagan? Is Ishtar, Eostar, is this, that, and the third? And it's always the same reoccurring questions that you think were already answered and debunked, but they bring them back up in different forms, in different ways. Some are better than others. There are some really well done pieces on these things because there are some interesting things that we could talk about. But oh wow, it's a super chat already. Might as well get to it. What do you think? Because this was we were just doing an open chat anyway, so. If you guys got super chats, throw them out there. Let's Cindy Lamachia, thank you for the super chat. Does Dr. Kip think the Dead Sea Scrolls have any Christian elements? This is sort of what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. So, I mean, the simple answer is no, and the reason for that is because the Dead Sea Scrolls essentially predate Christianity. If the first Christian writings are starting to pop up around the 50s, this is close to the time when the last of the so-called Dead Sea Scrolls, or I should say at least the Qumran scrolls, this is sort of the time when the last of those are being written. But I will say that there is certainly some cross-pollination going on. There's certainly elements within the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's aspects of the theology and the thinking of the people who wrote and collected them that appear very similar to what we see in Christianity. Many of the elements, many of the apocalyptic and messianic elements from the scrolls have helped us to understand Christianity better, and they've helped to show Christianity's place within the late Second Temple Jewish milieu, and some of the cosmology as well within the Dead Sea Scrolls reflects what you see happening within Christianity. But we have to. I think it's pretty important to be clear here that we're dealing with two pretty separate, distinct Jewish sects. The Dead Sea Scrolls, most believe, were written by a group of Essenes living in Qumran, and the Christian literature, I think, while it has its roots certainly within Jewish religion, was very much, by the time the Gospels were written, certainly very much became a Greco-Roman take on one aspect of Jewish religion. So, but thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so back to what I was saying right before that came up, and I appreciated that, by the way. But I was saying that people talk about Easter and say, is Christian a pagan holiday? And they point to Easter in the Norse lands, Germanic holiday. And but you can't. Here's the thing. Here's the thing I say. This is the end of the conversation. So, do you think Jesus existed? If the answer is no, then yeah, you can go down that path all you want. You could just whatever. If you think it's all myth, it's all a myth. It's all there's a conspiracy to invent Jesus. You could plug in, play whatever you want to do. But if you're like most of us who like to deal in facts and logic and what's more logical, much more reasonable, then you would say there was a guy named Jesus who was probably killed on Passover Eve, just like it says in Josephus, just like it says in the Talmud, just like it says in all the extra biblical sources that say there was a guy and he was a rabbi of some sort. He had a following and he went to Jerusalem and got crucified. Okay. So if you accept that that's true, which I do, I think you do too, then you can't say Easter's a pagan holiday because we know he was killed on, it just happens to be on Passover when he gets killed, which is the reason why people think, like you could say that they apply the 3-day motif to him later on. I'm with you on that. There's probably some truth to that, maybe. But the fact is, Passover was already a thing. He goes into Jerusalem during Passover. He gets killed. That's how you get the holiday of Easter for Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So you really can't say it's pagan because it just happens to be on that day.
Yeah, I would generally agree with all of that. I will say though that I mean the Easter that we know it now is certainly not. I mean, it's certainly not Pesach, and it's certainly. I think it's it's a Christian holiday, and this is not my period, right? The stuff that occurred, post post temple and then into the medieval period. Certainly, as far as I know, there's a lot of pagan, I guess, borrowing. There's a lot of syncretism going on,
right?
And I think that's the real message here. Maybe that's the real point here. The thing, the interesting takeaways is just how malleable these festivals can be.
Right.
And one of the reasons for that is at the heart of it, these all developed out of agrarian cultures.
Yeah.
That followed the same or very similar cycles of seasons and of time. The calendars were very important to these people because
this is the first month of the year. Nisan was their January, basically.
Yeah.
And the reason
Exactly.
why is
So
because this is the time of the year when things start to grow back again. So they would
exactly.
make their calendars. So you can argue that Passover is based off pagan holidays predating from
Well,
Babylon,
y-
but then you still have
it's
to go
and
into why.
I don't I wouldn't say I mean if we're going to talk about the pre-Babylon, what I would say about Pesach is that this is at the heart of it. This is an agrarian festival,
Right.
right? That was nationalized, that came to take on uh a national basically take on a national founding myth, which essentially transformed the festival into this which was actually um what was actually two agrarian festivals, basically mashing them together and developing a completely different ethos around them. So I mean, as when I the earliest forms scholars tend to think of Pesach are, this combination of two festivals. That's the Passover itself, which was the festival featuring the lamb, and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was which was a festival like a of dirt farmers, of land landowners and people who tilled the earth for their food. So you got these. I mean, you've got these two different types of people. You've got uh, the people who celebrate this grain festival, and you've got the people who are pastoralists, keeping their flocks, who celebrate um, the same season differently. The first festival, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, developed out of this culture which depended upon, and these group of people who depended on um you know the fruits of the land for their sustenance. On the other side, you have these pastoralists who offered up a burnt offering, a sacrificial lamb, uh in in terms of inaugurating the beginning of another new season. And I think, in the far distant past, in the area out of which the Jewish religion developed, you probably had these two festivals occurring simultaneously, at or near the same period of time, celebrated by these different elements, these different pockets within the region of people. And you know, as part of the uh, the importance that developed from a political perspective of keeping these people together, of instilling some sort of nationalistic unity. It was really the rulers, the leaders in ancient Israel, or in this early Canaanite culture, that married the idea of these two festivals together to the founding story, to the national myth of the Exodus.
Right.
So, just festivals are for forever. Festivals have been super important. I think maybe we're living in a time now, maybe for the first time, where uh, they've become, um, I don't know, about less significant, or their whole function has now changed, just because we don't depend on the elements, on the earth,
More
and on the
commercialized.
land, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe that's it, right? These
Yeah.
have become That's good. Where we once offered to the gods in order to continue supplying us with food, now we've shifted that focus away onto I guess the gods of consumerism.
Right.
That's essentially what we've done, right?
Yeah.
So
What do you think of this super
yeah.
chat here? Constellation Pegasus. What is
Oh,
the Jewish Barak?
the Jewish Baruch. Sorry, I'm the is that the Jewish blessing?
Not sure.
Uh,
I know Constellation Pegasus goes deep, so
it really does. I
yeah,
know. I get I get thrown off by him
yeah.
all the time. Throw another type up some more context and depth for us there.
Yes, Constellation
Constellation
Pegasus. If you're
Pegasus.
watching, I'm looking out for you.
Throw
But
something else in
yeah,
there.
like you did make a good point though. I think that it doesn't matter because whether it came from some Babylonian agricultural festival that's based off the moon, the first or
Mhm.
what is it, first full moon or first whatever moon after the Nisan month, which is the first month. I think that's what it's based off, something like that. I mean, I could probably butcher that, but whatever. Regardless, based on the calendar,
Yeah.
they picked this time of the year to have the festival for X amount of reasons. All right, we could go down that path all day. But by the time it gets down to Christianity, by the time it gets to where you have Passover in Israel and Jesus goes down to, do whatever he wants to do, whether he's going down there to celebrate or whether he's going down there to preach or whatever it was, based on what we think about who the historical Jesus was, regardless I do believe that is when he got killed. And a lot of people say that
I mean,
they don't. A lot of people say that they don't hold trials during Passover, but it actually says he was killed right before Passover.
yeah. I mean,
So
it was very important. That was yeah, you got to get it. I mean, that's part of the story, right?
right,
There was a rush to get this over in time uh
right,
for the celebration.
which is
So,
plausible.
yeah. Yeah, totally. It's totally plausible. So, yeah.
I don't see any comments from Constellation Pegasus, but maybe
No,
he might have stepped
he'll
away
come
from.
back eventually.
Yeah, but
So,
what do you think about this whole Estora Ishtar connection thing? Do you know anything about? I know this is not your
I
territory.
not no, and I don't know a lot about that either. But I think it's I'm comfortable with the idea that I noticed someone in the chat mentioned that we certainly know that Pesach was around because at the time of Hezekiah. I mean, I would say uh, the uh, the um, uh, Reformation, I guess, or the changes instituted by Josiah to Passover are significant. We're in a significant enough part of his overall religious program to suggest that it was certainly around for a long time. So,
Right.
I mean, if whether there was some shifting that took place and some further development that occurred as a result of the encounter with the Babylonians, I don't really know anything about that. But yeah, I think that's entirely possible. I think it's entirely probable. But the festival itself, Pesach, is something that the Jews were certainly celebrating long before they ever went to Babylon, before they ever went into exile. So
You know what I think is
yeah,
another thing that people don't talk about a lot is that the calendar that the Jews are using with Nisan, Adar,
mm,
Tammuz, those are
it's a Babylonian
Babylonian
calendar.
months. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's not that unlikely to say if they're still using Babylonian calendar, why wouldn't they have other Babylonian influences, right? We know how
still using a Babylonian alphabet.
yeah, the Semitic languages, you got the Code of Hammurabi interwoven within Deuteronomy. You see that all over the
So
place.
yeah,
It's
but I
definitely a
think
lot.
this is an important point here. So what we know is Hebrew, the language itself, the alphabet, the letters, the script is not a Hebrew script. It's Aramaic.
Right.
So and
It's
the
like Latin and
reason
English.
for that,
It's like we have the
Yeah,
Latin script. We don't. There's not
yeah,
there's no such thing as well, I guess you could say English is a little bit different because it has a few different. But for the most part, it's Latin. It's a Latin
yeah.
alphabet.
But the difference is there is a Hebrew script
Right.
that passed out of use,
Right.
and in large part passed out of use just because by virtue of the time that the Jews spent in Babylon, and just this is one of the results of the Babylonian exile. One of the neat things we see taking place in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we see within the Samaritan communities, which are contemporary
Right.
to Qumran, is this strenuous effort to try and preserve the Hebrew script, which we now, rather, ridiculously refer to Paleo Hebrew. It's Hebrew. The Paleo Hebrew is Hebrew.
Right.
It's the script that was used by the Hebrews prior to their time in Babylon. So, but one of the things that both the Qumranites and the Samaritans were doing, after the 3rd century BCE, was committing lots of literature to scrolls in Paleo Hebrew because they understood the importance of this as a national, a piece of their national identity, of their culture. This is something you also see occurring in the in the Hasmonean administration in the 2nd century BCE. The coinage of the Hasmoneans is all stamped in the Paleo Hebrew script. So it's
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to see. That's why I love archaeology. Archaeology does not lie. It's right there. You can see it. You can touch it. You can feel it. You know what I mean? There is interpretation, though. I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying that
okay. Yeah.
I'm saying you get the solution from it, but you have something to go off.
Yeah.
You get an archaeologist, and then you get 2 historians. Let them argue over it, and then we get truth from that, right?
Yeah. And you
That's
end
what I
up
love about
you end up in situations like we're experiencing right now with the Mount Ebal inscription,
Right.
right?
There's something there.
So
We don't know what it
it
is.
doesn't
There's something
lie. You're correct. It doesn't lie. And yes, it is very heavily open to interpretation, but you've got um you've got these 2 archaeologists on the one side saying this is what the text is, and this is how old it is, and this is how it connects to Joshua chapter 8 and Deuteronomy 27. And then you've got scholars on the other side going, whoa, I mean, we haven't seen it yet, so until I've actually seen something, I don't know. So I don't know what the text says or how accurate your transcription of the text is. But then even the transcription that you've provided to us is so it's ambiguous enough that yes, on the one hand, you can connect this to Joshua chapter 8 and Deuteronomy 27, but on the other hand, um, maybe Joshua chapter 8 and Deuteronomy 27 developed from a longer standing tradition that that's already connected to Mount Ebal, and very much like what we were talking about with the festivals, has been deeply theologically massaged and worked into a larger national ethos and
right.
a story of identity. So, and I think one of the one of the critics of the Mount Ebal inscription is a scholar by the name of Christopher Rolston, who's an epigrapher from George Washington University. And he's very, very good. Something that he noted, which I think is very important, is the archaeologists have discovered the text, have attempted to marshal this into some sort of argument for the literary construction of the Torah as
Yeah.
far back as the Bronze Age. And he says, well, I mean, if what they're telling us is true, there's only there's only like it's either 3 or 8 words on this inscription that are repeated. He says that's not literature. And he's
Yeah.
absolutely right. You
Yeah, I think
know,
you're right.
just as we can put the language back that far and we can see texts that early, and whether this is a Hebrew text or a more appropriately probably a Northwest Semitic text,
That's what I've been
right?
hearing a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
So
sense.
sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but maybe
No,
we
you're good.
should
Constellation
oh
packages
look,
came back.
he even
Yeah.
gave you more money.
I know. I love
Wow, what a good
Constellation.
guy.
Great, great friend. But I was
Oh,
you
okay.
didn't have to do that. I was looking out for your
The
comment,
Baruch.
but I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So did you
So
wondering what 3 Barak was.
what is
Wanted
3 Baruch?
oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is there are reams and reams of what we now identify as um oh shoot, the word apocryphal
Okay.
texts, which are basically a way of saying ancient texts that were not included in our Bible, our Protestant Bibles, or if you're a Catholic, in your Catholic Bible, or in one of the collections of Scripture. It's a terribly anachronistic term, because it presumes this collection in the first place. What in actual fact, what we have is just piles of literature, piles of Jewish literature in the Second Temple period, and no real quote unquote scripture, except perhaps outside of something like the Torah or maybe some of the prophets. And I think even this it's different depending on which Jewish community you're talking to. So and then you have another collection of texts which a number of scholars have designated as pseudepigrapha, which are loosely translates to false writings. These are texts that are written in the name of a like a famous Jewish figure such as Ezra or Daniel or Moses or Jeremiah or Baruch in this case. Um, and this is also a very unfortunate label to attach to these texts, because it suggests that while these documents that we designate as pseudepigrapha were, written in the name of a prophet, but was not actually written by the specific prophet, it kind of presumes that anything that doesn't qualify as pseudepigrapha was written by whom it claims to have been written by. And, that's just not the case. I mean, you've got the book of Daniel was absolutely not written by, a guy named Daniel.
Right.
Right? The book of Deuteronomy was not written by Moses. So
It's like, and then Moses died, and then it's like, wait, who's writing that part?
Exactly. So this is the background. So three Baruch is one of these texts that was attributed to Baruch. It seems to have been very popular in the Second Temple period to attribute text to Baruch, and Baruch was a companion of Jeremiah. He came from a priestly family. I believe he came out of the scribal family of Shephalah. I think that was his name. I have to go back and look. So he was he was essentially Jeremiah's scribe. He wrote down the prophecies that Jeremiah uttered. I think it's kind of cool because there's stories about Baruch or there's stories featuring that mention Baruch, where in one of them, I think it's in chapter 29. I'm going to get this wrong, but there's an incident in Jeremiah where he asked Baruch to write down everything, all his prophecies, and Baruch takes or he does so, and then Jeremiah takes them and reads them in the temple. He reads them out loud and freaks everybody out. Everybody's upset by them, so they arrest him and they take him to the king. And then he reads them in front of the king, and the king takes the scroll and destroys it. And Jeremiah is, flogged and sent on his way. And then he goes home and he instructs Baruch, well, now you have to write it out again. All the prophecies that I spoke. Within a real world context, are we to imagine here that that this is an exact copy of the same prophecies that Jeremiah had him write out earlier? Of course
Right.
not. This is the way things worked in the ancient world. When you wrote out copies of things, when you wrote things down, it was almost never the same as what was actually spoken.
Right.
And when people would preach sermons or deliver oracles, if they did so multiple times on multiple different occasions, they were not always the same. Right? There's changes to them. But there's a very interesting part where in this text where it says that Baruch wrote down everything that Jeremiah told him, but then it says he added a bunch of stuff to it. Literally, that's what it says in the text, right? So this is kind of the nature. This is part of the very interesting interplay between spoken prophecy and what was written down, and the role that scribes had in terms of the transmission of prophecy. So Baruch becomes this important figure, right?
Isn't his
In
name
the
Jesus
Septuagint.
Pardon me? Jesus? Is his name Jesus or by someone? I think I've read that somewhere. No, Jesus Baruch.
Yeah, I think no. This is something different.
Okay, I think maybe I'm thinking of Sirach.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you might be. So, but he plays an important role at the end of the Septuagint version of Jeremiah, which most scholars tend to think is like the earliest form of the book that we have. Septuagint Jeremiah actually ends with this very strange oracle that was delivered directly to Baruch.
Wow.
And then it just that's the end of the book. And then within the Septuagint collection, the very next book is the book of Baruch. So it's been suggested by some, this is something that I tend to think, is that there was a tradition within early Judaism whereby Baruch was seen as the natural, like he was the mantle inheritor. He became, Jeremiah's successor. And this is reflected within the text, right? Jeremiah became, first Jeremiah, then the book of Baruch. And I think there's some evidence for this as well from the Dead Sea Scrolls indirectly, where you've got a text like the Apocrypha of Jeremiah, which I think you can read as sort of an alternative version whereby Baruch is not the successor of Jeremiah.
Sure.
And the Septuagint version of Jeremiah actually ends quite differently. So, anyways, Third Baruch, it's one of these many Jewish texts that was written in the name of Baruch. Probably not that early though. As far as I know, Third Baruch is later, and late enough that it contains a good number of Christian interpolations in it.
Sure.
So, sorry about that. That was a rambly long.
No, that was a very good answer.
This question.
Yeah.
So
I hope that answers that consolation.
Quickly, when did the Jews adopt? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was going to say thank you for the super chat, Yakuvi. When did the Jews adopt Phoenician script? This is going back to what we were saying earlier.
So I think that again here there's a terminological problem here. The Jews, when we speak of the Jews, we're talking about the people after the exile. Basically came out of Babylon and controlled the region of what's called the Yehud, which was the Persian province that basically became the Hasmonean kingdom in the 2nd century BCE. So these are the Jews. Prior to the Babylonian exile, I don't like to talk about the people from the region as the Jews. They were never referred to as such.
Sure.
There were people from the kingdom of Judah, or people from, the northern kingdom of Israel. So, and I don't know that we can even talk about these people adopting the Phoenician script. It's the like this is basically the script that they started out with. I don't think they had anything that
It's the
really
common.
really
That's
predated
the
this.
that's the common script of the
Yeah,
whole region,
it's
right?
sort of like the common regional script. And what actually happened was, as I mentioned, that got abandoned many, many years later as a result of the Babylonian exile. The
Right.
Jews themselves ended up, adopting the Aramaic script, which
I
is
see.
what survives in our Hebrew Bibles. So, and then yeah, the Paleo Hebrew that does appear in this same period of time is, this is what the Samaritans are writing their texts in, and the people at Qumran are using it as well. But this is, in a way, this is kind of a form of resistance against the the conventional practice by this point, which is to
Right.
use the Aramaic script.
That makes
So
That's a good answer. Anibal Eric
uh,
Romero, thank you for that super chat. Says, when was John the Baptizer one of the two Essene Messiah? Great fan of Dr. Davis and his Dead Sea Scrolls work. Regards to both of you from Lima, Peru. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Really, really.
thank you very much, and about Eric Romero. Um, so I do not think John Tyler was one of the two Essene messiahs. I think that I'm not convinced that John was an Essene. There's a popular thought that he was. I'm not convinced by that. I think it's possible.
It's possible.
But I think what we're seeing happening here is reflective of just, I guess, a larger Judean context wherein lots of similar ideas were held in common by a good number of people. So all that to say, I think, and one of the reasons, so um, I think uh, the John that we see presented in the Gospels, and I guess in Josephus as well, looks to me like, if he ever was part of the Essene movement, he was. It seems to me that he was disillusioned by it in some respect, enough so that he felt it necessary to branch out on his own and to start doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Um, so and yeah, so I don't know. I don't believe he was one of the two Assisi. I think
It's
I think
definitely an
you're dealing
interesting.
with.
It's definitely an interesting question, though, for sure.
It sure is. It definitely is.
And
And
if I'm not mistaken, isn't there a passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls that does talk about two messiahs, or is that some? Is that
oh, it's a fairly common motif throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls is that there will be two anointed ones, which is the basic translation of the Hebrew word Mashiach, from which we get Messiah. There would be an anointed king, a royal Messiah. Messiah. This is the descendant of David,
the
who
triumphant?
would who would go into battle against with the forces of Yahweh against the enemies of Israel and reestablish the kingdom of Israel. And then there would be an anointed one from the line of Aaron, and
Mm,
this would be a messianic priest who, it seems in some texts, appears to have even a higher level of authority than the Messiah of David. And he is the one who's going to serve in the new um, celestial temple, basically.
Wow.
That's going to replace the Jerusalem temple, because one of the things that many of the Dead Sea Scrolls allude to and indicate is this idea that the Jerusalem temple is just irreparably corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
There's no room for it anymore. There's a new, part of the theology is this idea that there's going to be a new temple as well.
I'm surprised the Christians tried to take these two messiahs and make them one, because you have them, they're trying to make Jesus into the king, the David line, which he's not. He's not a king. He didn't unite the tribes. I'm surprised they didn't try to say he's the Aaron bloodline. Why wouldn't they go that route? Because he's more of a rabbi and more of a spiritual. He's not a king, right? And then they call him a king, mocking him.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a good thought, and I wonder. This is just me spinning off the top of my head. I am wondering if some of this can actually be marshaled into, another indication of the existence of an historical Jesus.
Right.
The fact that he was not part of an actual priestly lineage.
Right, exactly.
So if there was this genetic connection made between Jesus and both the throne of David and the line of Aaron, I think that would be unusual,
Right.
or I should say that would be historically unusual. That would be,
right.
And honestly, that would be a tremendous, a tremendous powerful literary theological feature of the religion, and yet the Christians never went there. And of course, a lot of this has to do too with just how much Christianity is so much more a reflection of a Pauline Greco-Roman religion, as opposed to what I think likely preceded it, which would have been the religion of the group we tend to know as the Ebionites,
right,
of which we almost know nothing about, right.
Yeah. So Jesus saves. Thank you for the super chat. How can we know that Moses and Daniel didn't write original forms that were updated and made into its final form? So he's basically saying, why can't there be a book of Moses that was handed down and then they just changed it a little bit, but it's mostly Moses? It's a good question.
It's a good question, and I would say, I think so. From an historical perspective, you're right. We can't know this. You can always posit this, that there's these deep historical kernels that stretch way back into the distant past. The problem with that idea is that the literature itself, the literature, the texts, the manuscripts, rather mitigate strongly against that. For one thing, all of this is quite late. We don't have any texts at all. We have no manuscript evidence that predates the 3rd century. None at all. And what we do have are reflections within the texts that are attributed to Moses of periods of time that are demonstrably much later. What's within the Torah, the text of Moses, and depending on which text you're talking about, is much more closely reflective of what's taking place during the monarchy. I just did a long stream about this on Derek's Myth Vision channel last week.
Yeah.
About the so we did this fun stream all about the story of Tamar and Judah from Genesis chapter 38, and how this is reflective of what was taking place in the administration of David during the 10th century, or maybe even later. So, it's what we're looking at is the literature here suggests to us that this comes from a much later period of time and is not Moses. On the other hand, what the book of Deuteronomy, scholars are absolutely convinced, was written during the time or very shortly before the time of Josiah's reforms, precisely because they reflect the situation of Judah in the
Right.
7th century. And I'd say the same thing about Daniel. Now I'm just setting aside the stuff which I think is probably earlier, and that's the court tales, which are all written in the third person, by the way. These are not written, on the face of them, they're not written by Daniel. These are narrated stories about this figure. So I think at the outset we could say very likely this guy didn't write this stuff because of the fact that it doesn't make any claim to Daedalic authorship. That comes in the later material in chapters 7 through 12, which are these visions of Daniel, which all pertain to the events of the 2nd century BCE.
You're right.
So that is the clue. These texts don't have, much of anything to do with the Babylonian Empire of the 6th century, and they have everything to do with happening during the Antiochian crisis of the 2nd century
Right.
BCE. So that's essentially how we get there.
It's a good point. And yeah, like you said, I remember another scholar telling me that imagine if you're comparing texts from Shakespeare's time, but you're reading it. It says it's from Shakespeare's time, so you know how Shakespeare says thou and thus and spake and all those. But you read it and it's like, God damn, this girl's fine as hell. Like you could tell it's from today. Like you could tell the person who wrote it is all modern Southern Baptist type of. That's how you can tell the languages and what time period they're in. And when you study that stuff all day, every day, without doubt when it's written.
True. Yeah. I'm gonna make a plug here. If this is something that interests people, next weekend on Saturday, I'm actually doing a debate on Derek's channel with my good friend Matthew Philip Bonger.
Nice.
And we're debating Jonathan Sheffield and a colleague of his, all about. I believe the question is it has to do with Cyrus in the book of Isaiah, and basically, addressing this issue of whether the book of Isaiah was written entirely in the 8th century BCE by this figure named Isaiah, or whether this is a compilation of multiple prophecies written by multiple figures over many centuries.
Right.
But, this is part of the work of literary scholars and historians. You have to look carefully at the literature, and you can't, when you're dealing with stuff from antiquity, you can't always just hit at value, just because by nature of the fact that the people from antiquity wrote differently than we did today. They employed different types of conventions. They, things that there was no such thing as intellectual property back then. So it requires a careful hand and a careful eye and a really, really clear understanding of the historical situations and the languages and these sorts of things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that debate when that comes on. Imposter Suspense, thank you for that super chat. Appreciate it. It's a face that I see pretty often on this channel. Is there any DSS fragments that talk about Pesach festivals Love the channel. Happy spring equinox. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
So, offhand, I actually don't know, but I could just look this up right now.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. You got access to that super library over there. You were showing me when we went live at one time. You have like this super like super secret Dead Sea Scrolls library that you have over there.
It's not that super secret. It's not that super secret. It's something that anybody.
No, I'm just.
Yeah.
But you do have all the fragments on was it PDF form or something like that?
No, I've got them in tagged grammatical form in my my Bible software. Anybody can get them. So, but I mean, and I have other I've got some things that maybe are unavailable to some people. Like a good friend of mine is the one who basically wrote the program for like all the biblical Dead Sea Scrolls, all Bible text. So I always have a regularly updated version of that, and yeah, and then I have photographs of things that not everybody can see. But all that to say too, if you're interested, you can see photographs of almost everything online, and they're in spectacular high definition. They're both in infrared and in color. So yeah, and the color ones are not of much interest to anybody except people like me, because you can't actually see any of the text on most of them. But I really like them because they show evidence of the ways that these fragments deteriorated, and that helps me to gain a sense of how to put them back together. So that's fun. So yes, there's plenty of discussion about Passover, a number of the different texts. Let me just see why don't I have to open something else up here. Just give me a second here.
Yeah, you're good.
There it is. Okay, let's open that one up. Okay, so of course most of this stuff occurs within the so-called calendrical documents. So what I will say is within the community, there was not much overt reflection on Pesach. There's a couple of instances in the Damascus document where there's some discussion about Passover, but by and large, what the writers and the collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls are most concerned about is that they're following the calendar correctly, or that they're following, the correct calendar. Around this time, there was, an ongoing dispute. I'm a believer that the earliest Hebrew calendars, the earliest Jewish calendars, were probably solar, and that the lunar calendar was adopted.
Especially when you look at the fact that if you are to believe, well, not to believe, we know that the Egyptians ruled Canaan for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, they were the solar calendar people.
Yeah.
The Babylonians, who later on take over that region, had a lunar calendar. So it just makes sense logically that's what would happen.
Exactly. So the Jews after exile in Babylon ended up adopting a lunar calendar within the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they're pretty strict conservatives. They're all about making sure that their religion was, the religion of antiquity. There were strenuous efforts made to keep holding to some form of the solar calendar. Of course, for them, this created an irreconcilable mess.
Right.
Just because, like, on their own, a lunar calendar and a solar calendar on their own, they don't actually work really well.
Right.
And because of that, you had to do these complicated intercalations in order to bring the calendars back into line with nature,
You gotta
essentially.
add leap years and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you have to do all sorts of you do all sorts of things to bring everything back into sync.
Right.
But when you're, when you're living in the Qumran community and you're trying to observe a solar calendar within a region that's lunar, it just becomes that much more difficult. So there was some work towards a solar lunar, like sort of an amalgamated solar lunar calendar, which didn't work nearly as good as the Gregorian
Sure.
solar lunar calendar. Um, and I think they deserve some credit for trying this, but there's huge numbers of texts that are dedicated to just this problem of
Right.
bringing the calendars back into sync, you know, making sure we're celebrating the festivals on the right days, because that's super important.
Right.
The very fabric of the cosmos depends
Right.
on making sure that you've got the festivals right and that you're celebrating them at the right time.
Yep.
So yeah, and this is where almost all the discussion about Pesach takes place. It has to do with just making sure that it's taking place when it's supposed to be taking place.
Absolutely. I think we got 2 left. So yeah. Gaius Julius Windex, good to see you. Thank you for the super chat. Did Greek ever become the main language of the Jews in any way?
I think uh that's kind of a complicated question, just because what tended to happen uh in the region, particularly around the Mediterranean, during this period, the Second Temple period, is that languages were functional. So you would serve different functions in different contexts. The closest modern comparison I can think of is something like the difference between speaking High German or Low German in some of these s- sort of strict fundamentalist German Christian communities, or maybe even something like the way in which English has become uh, the language of business, at least for the last, I don't know, the last several decades. Back in the 19th and the early 20th century, the language of theology was German, which is why, for a long time, not so much anymore, but for a long time, we all had to learn how to read German
Mm-hmm.
uh, when learning when studying theology, because that's where almost everything was written. And if you wanted to be taken seriously when
Philosophy too.
writing theology and philosophy too, yeah, you had to write German. You had to be able to do it right. So things kind of function this way in the Second Temple period. So what we're dealing with is uh, Aramaic language was the vernacular among Jewish communities, but they conducted business, as near as we can tell. They also conducted business in Greek, and this because of the very global effects of Hellenization after Alexander the Great.
Sure.
So there was like the language of daily life, but then there was also the language of commerce. And this obviously had such a strong effect that this was still maintained even in the Roman Empire. After Rome took over the world, uh everyone was still conducting business in Greek.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good point. Titan Uranus is in the chat.
Hello.
It's like saying that name. Last one.
It's fun.
Last super chat, and we are
Okay.
This has been a good, really good chat so far. Constellation Pegasus is back. I love you.
Oh man.
Last one, he says. Last one. Are there any photographs of Mithras in old Christian churches? I have read that some person saw Mithras in a basement once in his temple or something, was converted to a church. There is this image. I don't know
Dude, I have no idea.
how Mithras in.
I'm sorry.
No, so what happened was there is this image right here. I think he's talking about this one. I just found it. It's a church. It is a Christian church, and underneath it, it's a repurposed temple of Mithra. That's all it is.
Oh, okay.
It's not like, so what people try to do is they'll say, "Oh, look, the people who worship Mithra or the people who worship Jesus really worship Mithra," and it's like, no, that's not what that is. It's all that is they repurposed an old temple that had a Mithra in the basement. I'm trying to find the picture, and where do I have it? Yeah, I do have it. But that's what that is. It doesn't mean they secretly worship Mithra. It just means that this Mithra temple was a Mithraic temple, and later on, when Christianity blew up in the Roman Empire, all these Mithraic temples got repurposed. I mean, it's not that crazy to think. Why wouldn't you use a temple that's already built, a nice, strong built temple? And you know what I'm saying?
It's not just the practical, like it's not just for practical purposes either. It was I mean, these were statements of political power too, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're rebranding a temple, okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So if you're rebranding a temple, basically what you're doing is you're moving in to the house, the dwelling place, basically of the old gods.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very much in line with the thinking of the ancient kings and what they would do when they would conquer places.
It is a good question. It is a good thought-provoking question, as in when you look at the timeline of Roman religion and how it sort of morphs and changes over time. You get the Roman imperial cult. Then you get the time of Constantine, where the Roman Empire splits. You got the pagans in the west and the Christians in the east. And then Constantine decides to unify the empire. And then during that century, which takes a couple more decades, but by the time you get to Theodosius, no more pagans no more. He's saying, this is it. We're just going to be Christians from now on. But it's interesting to see how before that, there was a lot of different worshipers worshiping different gods. There's a lot of pantheism going on. There's a lot of syncretism going on too, as well as that. But to say that people who worship Jesus really worship Mithra is just, there's no evidence of that. Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, I'm certainly open to the possibility that there were people who worship both Jesus and Mithra.
Of course.
In places.
And not only that,
times.
I would even go as far as say that some of the elements of the Mithraic religion might have influenced the Christian religion. I'm fine with that, but I'm not going to say that there's some secret cabal of people saying, these Christians, we're going to make them indirectly worship Mithras, and no one's ever going to know for the rest of the time. Like, what? You got to think about what's the point of that. What would be the reason for that? Who gains anything from that? You know what I mean? Like only Christians would gain from that, because now their religion's going to grow and Mithras goes down the drain. So the Mithraic temples or worshippers don't gain from that. Why would you want? It's like the Roman Providence thing. Like I love talking about Roman Providence. I love having James Valiant on to talk about that stuff. But at the end of the day, why would Vespasian want people to secretly worship him as Jesus when his name's going to be forgotten, but Jesus' name's going to be remembered? That doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't you just want to make a religion?
I would agree.
Wouldn't you just say, "Oh, I'm Vespasian, I'm God"?
We should all be Vespasianites.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. Like, they're all going to secretly worship me for the rest of the time.
I can no, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So did you do you have any more?
No, that was the last super chat.
The last okay.
Yeah.
So did you? I assume you did you watch the Licona Ehrman
Yes.
debate?
Yes.
Yeah. How was that? I didn't see it.
I
So
thought it was a really good debate. I like Mike Licona a lot. I think he's a good dude. But
yeah, I do too.
I'm honestly going to say this. I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. I really think that Dr. Bart brought the facts. And I really, really enjoyed his closing speech. Really enjoyed his
Yeah,
closing.
eh? You know, I've heard mixed
Really,
things about this.
I
I've heard
thought it was right.
really, eh? I've heard some people say that he should have stuck more to the text and not focus so much on philosophy. And then and then
Talk about towards
I've
the end.
seen yeah.
Yeah, towards the end, he got philosophical with it. He got
Yeah.
sort of political with it, actually.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
not it wasn't like that the whole time. He was just doing that. He just did that in the closing speech, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay. I will
that's
say, I have to say in your comments about Lacona too. I've met Ehrman once. I've never met Mike Lacona. But based on what I've seen online and in the media and stuff, while I think I probably am on in line with Bart Ehrman on just about 99% of his talking points and his scholarship. In contrast to Lacona, if I were to pick one of the two of them to sit down and have a beer with, probably be Mike Lacona. I
why
gotta
not?
say, but
He
I don't
seems
know.
like a cool dude. Yeah,
So he seems like a good dude.
yeah.
So, yeah, no, I was interested, in large part just because I kind of think this is one of these, like, I mean, how many new things is there to be said about the resurrection of Jesus and whether it happened or not?
They
Um,
exhausted every avenue in that debate. They
Hey,
exhausted.
let me know if this is something that came up, because this is something that particularly bugs me, with regards to the First Corinthians creed. Is it First Corinthians 13 or is it 15?
I think it's 15.
Okay, so the thing that I get really frustrated by is uh, is that when you read the creed in isolation, apart from the rest of what Paul is writing, you completely miss his entire point for talking about the creed in the first place. Is this something that did Ehrman ever talk about uh, the purpose of the creed, Paul's purpose in using the creed, and how it fits into First Corinthians? Because I think this is an important point.
I think he did talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like I'd like to rant about this for a
Sure.
minute or two.
Hey, the floor is yours. The
So
floor is yours.
yeah, like one of the things that really bugs me about the apologetic argument for the creed in First Corinthians 15. I think it's 15, right? Let's
Yeah,
take a
15.
look at it.
It is
I'm
15.
just going to
Yeah.
open it.
All right, I'll pull it up.
All right. Yeah, pull it up. So
NIV? NIV is good?
it doesn't matter to me.
All right, should I just share my screen then? Is that what I should do?
Sure, do that.
Share screen. Window, Chrome tab. There it is. Okay. Can you see that good?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can.
Am I showing it? Okay. Is it full?
No,
Is it,
it's not.
is it
It's
really
not.
small?
That's probably partly my fault and your fault too.
How's this?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
All right. So why don't you just is this the part that you're looking for?
So it starts, for what I received, I passed on to you
Oh, here it is.
as first
Resurrection of the dead.
importance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the point, right? Go back up. Here's the creed itself, right? It says, for what I received, I passed on to you as first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12. After that, excuse me, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. So now, Neil, apologists look at this and they tell us what? Like the significant thing that apologists think we should glean from this creed is what?
That according to the scriptures, this is what happened. But it doesn't say according to history or according to the truth or according to, just says according to this. Why does he keep pointing to that thing? Isn't that weird to me? Is that what you're getting at?
To the scriptures? This isn't actually what I'm getting at.
Okay.
So when I apologists talk about the creed, they always talk about this in the sense that Paul's providing a piece of evidence that someone can go and fact check, right? That the creed is here as a way of saying, if you don't believe me, go and talk to these people about what happened. But honestly, that's not what's going on in this text, because look at what he says right after this. So it says, okay, just hold on. So it's 9, verse 10. Okay, so, but by the grace of God, here he is about, who was he? Why is he so privileged to have seen the risen Jesus? But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Whether then it is I or they, this is what we preached, and this is what you believed. But here's what he says right after that. But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. So one of the big questions, one of the big problems, the issues that Paul is addressing in this letter is this. The Corinthians, there's I think it's earlier in the text, he says this explicitly. The Corinthians appear to be quite troubled by the fact that there are people in their congregation who have died.
Right.
There are people in their congregation who have died. And so Paul is going, so what they're saying is this. If Christ has been raised, why are people dying and staying dead? Because part of the message, certainly at the time of Paul, a key component of this whole Christian message is this, that Christ died, was raised from the dead as the first fruits of the resurrection, right?
Right.
Jesus was the first.
Is the new Adam.
Yes. And then the larger resurrection of the dead, which is part of like common Jewish apocalyptic thinking and theology from the period of time. This is going to follow.
Wow.
So some time has passed.
So he was supposed to usher in the kingdom of heaven on earth, and people were not supposed to die anymore. Supposed to live forever.
Yeah, or those who did die would be raised from the dead. They'd be raised. So the problem here is, clearly a bunch of people in the congregation have died. They're still dead. You've got people going, Paul, what the hell's going on? You said that because Christ was raised, then, everybody else is going to be raised from the dead. And yet we have brothers and sisters in our congregation who have died and they're still dead. So now let's go back up to the creed itself, and I'll show you why this is important. This is what he's saying. So, okay, here. What I received to you, I passed on as first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, who's still alive, to the 12, who, as far as we know, at the time of Paul, are all still alive. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at the same time. And here, what does he say here? Most of whom are still living, though some
Have
fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, who's still alive, then all the apostles who are still alive, and last of all, he appeared to me, abnormally born. I'm still alive. But here's the thing. This is not go and check with the 500, those are the 500 eyewitnesses who are still alive. No. This is, he appeared to these 500 people. Jesus appeared himself to these 500 people, and some of them are actually dead.
Right.
Now, who do you think you are that you guys should be raised from the dead before any of these others who actually saw the risen Jesus?
Wow.
If they're dead, then you need to relax, because obviously the resurrection that I preach it's still coming. So this has nothing at all to do with fact checking. This is not a fact checking text. Like, you should go out and talk to these people who are still alive, who saw Jesus rise from the dead. No, Paul's whole purpose here is something completely different. He's offering encouragement to the people in the Corinthian church that they can continue to have confidence in the resurrection of the dead, because even those people who actually saw Jesus rise from the dead, it hasn't happened for them yet. So just relax.
Wow.
So I and it bugs me. It
No,
constantly bugs me when apologists continue to talk about this creed. And I mean, it's patently ridiculous.
If you went back to the Corinthians, if you were to wake them all up from their resurrect them right now and show them that 2,000 years have passed and he's not back yet, you know what they would say? This is false.
Yes, they would.
Well, I mean, seriously,
damn.
What are we waiting for? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is part of it. Paul is going, just relax. It's going to happen.
Yeah, just any day
hasn't
now.
happened yet.
Right.
But you should know it hasn't happened yet. But you should know that there's, people in Jerusalem who actually saw Jesus, and they're waiting too.
Right.
So,
and what's crazy is how you get people like Gary Habermas who say that this is a primary source. It's the definition of a secondary source when somebody's saying that someone else saw them. You can't just make it a primary source because you feel like it. That to me blows my mind. That that's even still an thing where you have to address. Right?
Constellation Pegasus gets it here. Did you see?
Oh, here we got a super chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kipp is saying Paul is doing a 7-day
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's like, "Oh, no. You thought this is what I meant? No. It's still coming.
We're still waiting.
Just hold on." But it hasn't happened yet, but it is happening very, very soon. So, totally. But
that was an interesting point that you just brought up.
So, but it just, and the reason I mention that is just because when it comes to the to the creed, and I gotta say too, I've heard, and I did see, because I've watched some of the stuff that Doug put on his channel about the debate. I was happy to see Bart Ehrman challenge this whole idea that this creed dates within months of Jesus' resurrection. I mean, I think this is just the dumbest.
I never understood that.
I'm like, how do they know that? I've seen some people.
Gary Habermas says days. He says days.
Days. And I've seen some suggest that it has to do with the language. I'm like, what? Like, we can now date text to within days based on the language?
And based off a
Are
secondary,
you are you kidding me?
right? So
Like,
yeah, like I said, it's
it's
not a primary source.
nonsense. It is nonsense. There is no way to date this creed to any period in time except to like you can we know that Paul knew it. That's it.
That's it.
That's the best we can do.
That's all you can say. Topic discussed. Thank you for the super chat. Go subscribe to Topic Discussed. There's a good channel out there. Is Paul also explaining to Corinth or apologizing for whatever happened in Jesus' risen body?
Is Paul also explaining to Corinth or apologizing for whatever happened to Jesus' risen body? Let's go back and look at that again.
Okay.
At the creed.
All
I
right.
assume that Topic Discuss is asking specifically about the creed in 1 Corinthians 15.
I think you might be. Yeah. So there it is.
So, for what I received, I passed on to you as first importance that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures.
Jesus' risen body.
For whatever happened to Jesus' risen body, that he appeared. So, I mean, I think like now I'm trying to. It'd be great if Topic Discuss could maybe
he's saying he's trying to rationalize that if Jesus is risen and his body's not in the tomb anymore, then why are other people dying and not being able to rise with Jesus? Right? He's sort of like trying to rationalize why it happened with Jesus, but it can't happen with other people who are supposed to be
right. I don't think that's quite what Topic Discuss's question is, though. He wants to know whether Paul is offering an apologetic for whatever happened to Jesus' risen body, like the body itself.
That's what I'm saying. If he's out of the tomb and he's risen, they're saying, where is he then?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
This has got to be somewhere, right? He ascended to the Father. Okay. But then if he ascended to the Father,
but what does Paul say here?
Right. Which part are you looking at?
Just the whole thing. Like he appeared.
And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, and you are in your sin. You're still in your sins. Those who also have asleep in Christ are lost. If only for his life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied. But has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since the death through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. Yeah, right? I mean, Topic, you still there? If you're still there, let me get you some clarification on your question here. Because I think that's what you're getting at, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
The last enemy to be destroyed.
Maybe this is, like I'm not entirely sure. Like it's not clear to me from the creed itself how
Constellation Pegasus says, "I'm sick of this. Armageddon is always around the corner."
Yeah.
If you look at you could literally go to any decade from let's say when Christianity really was the state religion of the West. So let's say like 400 AD till like 1800. I'm not even joking. Pick any decade, and you'll see somebody from some church was saying the end of the world is coming. I'm not joking. That's how many there are. There's a whole Wikipedia page dedicated to failed end times dates. There's thousands of them in there.
Yeah.
The Pope in the year 1000, Pope Sylvester II, came out and spoke to the people of Rome and Vatican City and said, "This is the year 1000. Therefore, Satan's chains are going to be let go. He's going to be released into the world to lead people astray. The Antichrist is here. This is the end of the world. You have 30 years from now until 1033 until the end of the times comes. Get prepared." People freaked out. You could go look this up. It's written about in books all over the place. And didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm a little older than you, but maybe not than
here he goes.
Some
of
your audience. Yes. Bodies celestial, bodies terrestrial. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that could be there. I guess what you're suggesting is that the celestial body is something that's not here, right? It's not here, it's out there. Um yeah, I have to think about that. Maybe, but
It's
my
a good.
understanding of Paul has always my understanding of Paul has always been that the resurrection was something that was going to be uh very much here and now. Uh, so I don't
Yeah,
know. I have to think about that some more. But that's a good thought though.
it is.
I was gonna so with this Armageddon thing, um, I was born in the 70s and I grew up in the 80s. Um, we there was a very famous evangelical writer by the name of Hal Lindsey. Do you know this name?
Yeah, yeah. What is that? I have the book from my when I used to be a Christian.
The Late Great Planet Earth,
Yeah, Lake Grape. Yeah,
right? Yeah, who and he essentially took like Darby's dispensational theology and applied it to like the late 20th century. So it was all about like the USSR and the Iranian hostage crisis and all of this stuff was like, this was all he was reading all of this back into the book of Revelation. This is where like the locusts, the armored locusts, the giant armored locusts in the book of Revelation were actually like military helicopters, right?
yeah.
So all this kind of stuff. But this freaked the hell out of me when I was a kid. And yeah, I remember growing up with this kind of stuff. On that point, I have to tell another story here. So
Yeah, sure.
I I grew up in 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 a city in southern Alberta here in Canada called Calgary. Um, and I had a Sunday school teacher when I was in high school who would teach this very um, fierce dispensation sort of theology that came out of, like I said, the old Darby School and Dallas Theological Seminary. Um, and he actually had this amazing timeline of like a biblical chronology. It was beautifully painted on these large bed sheets and hang these around the room in our Sunday school class, and they like filled the entire room. It's this whole chronology that shows like everything from the very instant of creation all the way through to where we are in present day, and of course tracking that all with scripture and how that fits into like the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel and Ezekiel. It's
Right.
pretty wild stuff. But the amazing thing about the thing that I find so interesting and amazing is I found out much later that these um, bed sheets that the Sunday school teacher of mine had were actually commissioned by Ernest Manning, who
Really?
was a political figure. He was a premier. He was like the leader of the provincial government in Alberta. I think during the Second World War, or just after that, and he was like an evangelical minister, and actually had a weekly radio show that he would do from his desk in the legislature while he was in power. He was a minister before he became the premier. But he's the one who actually commissioned 6 or 8 of these sets of paintings, these large murals of dispensational theology. And
Wow.
somehow my Sunday school teacher ended up with one of these. So, which I think is pretty fascinating. Ernest
Yeah.
Manning, by the way, had a son whose name was Preston Manning, and he became the leader of of a party, one of the founding members and a leader of a political party in Canada called the Reform Party, which was like an alternative right wing party to our
It's like
progressive
libertarian
conservative
party,
party,
sort of. The libertarians.
kind of like that,
Yeah.
yeah. And basically destroyed the entire progressive conservative movement because um, what ended up happening was because of vote splitting between the progressive conservatives and the reforms, they decided to get together, and it basically ended up being like a big power grab by
Wow.
by like the religious right here in Canada. So
Wow.
there you go. There's some Canadian political history,
That's
along
interesting.
with some
I
Canadian church history.
actually found where he's talking about. He's talking about in
Oh yeah, okay.
because he's not lying. It says right here there are also heavenly bodies, and there are earthly bodies. The splendor of the
Oh
heavenly
yeah.
is one kind. The splendor of the earthly bodies is another. The sun has one kind of splendor. The moon has another, and stars another. And stars are different from
So it will
stars.
be with the resurrection of the dead.
So that is interesting. He
Right.
brings up a good
It
point.
is interesting. He does. So this is this is part of the apologetic, right?
And then we are and just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man.
There's so much, like, there's just such a strong focus throughout this entire letter
Yeah,
on on what's going to happen
right.
in the resurrection of the dead. You can't look at that and then go and look at the creed and not see it, right? He's
Right.
very, very concerned about this.
Yeah. You're definitely right about that. And then it gets overlooked a lot. They use this
Oh
as
my
a
goodness.
primary source. Look at that little
Yeah.
one sentence about 500 eyewitnesses, but they just ignore this whole entire. Well,
He
chill out,
reinvented
everyone.
it.
It's gonna happen any day now. Earthly
Yeah.
bodies, spiritual bodies. Don't worry,
Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
gonna happen. It's like
It's all
just
gonna
like
be good.
yeah,
Then we
constantly.
like Christian apologists do what Christian apologists do, right?
Yeah,
And they misunderstand things and they ignore things and they take things out of context. So
it's
yeah.
so frustrating, but it's so true. That's really what.
It
That's
is.
really the
It
state of
is. It's so
apologetics.
annoying.
And that's what it
Yeah.
is. Constellation Pegasus says, "Did Kip watch the major motion picture on Noah's Ark when the late great Planet Earth came out?" I didn't see it.
Oh god. No, I don't know this.
Check that out.
I need a title for this
I
because I have to
legitimately,
see
yeah.
this now.
Tell us the title of
You
it.
know what? Maybe I'm now that he mentions it, it's maybe I did. Um and I because it sounds like something that I got dragged to when I was a kid. We watched these, they would show these movies in our church, right? Like on Sunday night services. In fact, I there was this have you ever heard of this movie? Um what is it? If something about horsemen and horsemen, and if oh shoot, it was this terrible, terrible movie. This Christian, you know,
It's
low
about
grade
horses.
B film. What's that?
It's about horses. You said.
If footmen will tire you, then what will horsemen do? Something like that. It's based on a somebody please help me out in the
I'm not
chat
gonna
here.
lie.
Someone knows this
I get a
movie.
kick
It's
out of
like
I get a kick out of watching old movies that are about the Bible, especially when you go
I
back to like 50s and 60s. The movies they used to make back then are just
oh
they're so funny to watch. Like some of them are pretty good. Um, what's the guy, the famous
it's
director who he did a movie
so
about King David?
I hold on before you go there. I found it. If footmen tire you, what would horses do? Thank you, divine defecation. So seriously, so Neil, here I'm just gonna send this to you, okay? And you have to play this. You have to play this. It's just a little clip from this terrible movie.
All right.
But this,
you gotta
there's like
share the screen.
I'm just gonna put it in the private chat, and you could do it. There.
Okay. All right.
So click on that and share that, because my God, this movie.
All right. I got it. Let me share the screen, and then let me just make sure this is on full screen.
So nuts.
All right. So let me know when you can see this. Hold on 1 second. Share screen. You see it?
It's coming. There it is. Yeah. So just play this little bit. You can actually watch the whole movie on YouTube.
What's the matter, boy?
Where's my mama and my daddy? You killed them, haven't you?
Good. Think of how much better off you will be. The state will provide for you and take care of your every need. Much better than your mother or father either.
I won't go straight. I want my mama and my daddy.
Now you listen to me, little boy. What is done is done. You now belong to the state. Now you listen very carefully to what I have to say. We do not want to kill you. Be killed. Unless you cooperate.
What the?
Now then. Now if you will step on this picture of your Jesus with your heel, they will let you go free. But if you don't, it'll cut your head off.
One day you died for me, and I'm willing to die for you.
Why, you stupid little fool.
What? They cut his head off.
Dude. Okay. So okay, so it's like it's like part of it, it's like scenes of like this horrible dystopian, apocalyptic vision.
Cut your head off.
Yeah. And the communists are the Antichrist, right? And then it's juxtaposed against the guy who made this movie. He's like a preacher, and so he's preaching a sermon. So that's sort of where it cuts to. But
his head just fly off his body like it was.
Yes,
it was like
yes. But the whole movie's like that, right? And I kid you not, when I was a kid, I was like 6 years old or 7 years old or something, and they showed that movie in my church. I mean, just try to imagine. I'm sure you can think of the mind.
How old were you when you saw that?
Fuck. I was like 6. I was so messed up by that movie.
Fundamentalist.
Oh, it was so. Oh yeah, someone's sitting here. Estes. What was this guy's name? The preacher who made this movie. If I can find it, I'll let you know. Somebody else will probably. But it was so messed up.
Constellation Pegasus for like 700th time is super chatted. Thank you. The book is by Dave Balziger and Charles Seller.
In Search of Noah's Ark.
Nice.
Wow. I have to look it up. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that I saw and was, I've blocked it from my memory, like many of these things from when I was a little kid.
By the way, Orson Welles.
Estes Berkey. No, it wasn't Orson Welles. No, Orson Welles was a famous.
This is separate. Orson Welles played King David.
Oh, okay.
No, he didn't play King David. He played in the movie called David and Goliath. He played King Saul, King
really?
Saul. He was a really good actor
I don't know
too.
this one. He was.
I'll show you the picture of him as King Saul. This is
awesome.
It right here. This is Orson Welles, dude. He was a legend. Here it is.
So yes, thank you, Divine Defecation and Ken Scaletta. It was Estes Perkel who was the terrible guy who made that movie.
That was just awful. Movies like that are so bad that they're funny. Like, I can watch those. I can actually get entertainment from that. So, that's Orson Welles on the right. playing King
Oh,
Saul.
look at that! Wow,
That's 1960.
that's awesome.
Now that is actually a pretty good movie. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah?
The directing's on point. It's biblical, but it's like
Yeah.
I like watching old shit like that once in a while just to switch it
Hey,
up.
did you even know about this? That ABC, I guess it was within the last 10 years, tried to do a TV series based on the stories of David and Saul from
Really?
from
I
First and Second Samuel.
know there was a
It was
cartoon.
called.
There's
It wasn't a cartoon. It was live action. It was called Prophets and Kings. See if I can find anything on YouTube.
I'll have to check it out.
But, it wasn't. I mean, it was one episode aired on TV, and and that's as far as it went because it was pretty bad. So, I mean, in terms of
it was that bad. They had one episode and that was it.
They aired the pilot, and then it was just like, yeah, no one's watching this.
Only 2 people.
But I do think, like in line with my with the lecture that I gave last week about the succession narrative, I do think that the story of like the historical David, if there was such a figure, would be great cinema.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've often thought about that would be great cinema would be like an historical recreation of what actually happened in the court of Josiah. When the book of the law was discovered, and then he went on this this crazy campaign to basically reform the religion of Judah, and his attempts to reunify Israel, which included the slaughter of rival priests of Yahweh, on the altar of the altar at Bethel.
Wow,
it's a great story.
Yeah,
I mean, great in the sense.
A lot of that stuff.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's pretty fun. So
yeah, well, I think that's pretty much. This is a pretty good stream right here, if you ask me.
It was a good stream.
Thanks for coming.
Soren Alexander just said, "So let it be written, so let it be done," which is the famous line from the Ten Commandments, which is an awesome movie.
Yeah.
Based on the on Josephus version of the life of Moses. It's pretty great. So
yeah.
But it's so fitting because that movie used to air every year on Easter weekend. And for me, like I remember when I was a kid, and especially when I was a teenager, it was sort of like the sign that, because our spring break was always combined with Easter holidays, so it was always, you got Good Friday off, and then the entire rest of the week right after Easter Sunday, and then every Sunday, the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's the Ten Commandments was on TV, and I used to watch it, and it's a great movie. But it was also, for me, it was like, oh yes, spring break.
Right. It's like you just knew it was that time of the year.
So,
all right. Well, like I always say, you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over